Today we're going to learn how to build secure generative AI applications in Python, and also how we can add social logins to these applications. We're going to do that by implementing a simple example. We're going to build an application where the user can log in with their Google account, and then what we do is we take invoices from a specific directory in their Drive, so they have to give permissions for Drive and Sheets. We're going to take these PDF documents from this Drive folder. We're going to use OpenAI's API to extract information from these documents, and then we're going to take this information and paste it into a Google Sheets document, which is then the process of our generative AI tool. So this is more like a proof of concept. You can, of course, once you understood the whole process, customize this, use different APIs, add certain features. There's many things that you can do with that, but this is what we're going to do today in order to learn how to build secure generative AI applications. So let us get right into it. Now, before we jump right into the tutorial, I would like to show you what we're going to end up with here as a motivational preview up front. This is our secure GenAI application, in this case a PDF invoice processor. And of course, this is just a proof of concept, a simple prototype. You can make this more beautiful, more convenient. You can add more features. You can apply this to different use cases. But what we can do here now is we can log in with Google. So I can press this button. Since I used the application already, I'm directly logged in here with my Google account. The first time I use this, I have to check all the boxes, give all the permissions, accept all the risks and so on. And I also have to provide manually here, in this case now, the ID to the Sheets file and to the folder. Again, this can be made more convenient. For demonstration purposes, I kept it simple. And the idea is I have this Google Drive folder with a bunch of invoices. So here I have 5 invoices as PDF documents. And I can get the ID from the URL. So it's this part here, and also for the sheet file, which is completely empty, I also have the ID in the URL. I can just copy that, I can paste it into my tool, I can save the settings, and then I can just process PDFs. And what is happening now is the application has the authentication, so has the permissions to use the Google APIs with this account. And it takes all the documents from this folder, it extracts information from them using structured output from the OpenAI API, then it takes that information and it pastes it into this Google Sheets document. Now, of course, what we could do here is we could add some more, we could add some column names. So this would be invoice number, invoice date, invoice total or sum, recipient, sender, file name, and timestamp of the extraction. So you can just provide an additional line here. But that is what our tool does here. And this is what we're going to build in this video today to understand how we can handle authentication easily in GenAI applications. This is one use case. You can apply this to different APIs, to different social accounts, to different use cases in general. But we're going to learn how to go through this process of securing an AI application, a GenAI application in Python, without having to handle the authentication ourselves. All right, so let us now get started with the actual tutorial, and I want to briefly talk about the structure of this project today because we're going to use different components and different platforms, and it can be a bit overwhelming if you don't know what we're using for what. So what we're going to build is a FastAPI application. This is going to be the backend, which also serves some basic HTML, so our frontend, so to say. And this is going to connect to 3 different services or platforms. One of them that we already know on this channel quite well is the OpenAI API. This is what we're going to use for the structured output, for extracting the information from the text of the PDF documents. The second one is going to be the Google Cloud Platform itself. This is what allows us access to the Sheets API, to the Drive API. This is what we're going to use to interact with the Google services. And then we have a third service, which is for authentication, specifically authentication with the Google account. And for this, we're going to use Auth0. So let's talk about the last one first, Auth0. We're going to use Auth for GenAI in particular. So we're going to authenticate with the Google service or with the Google account, and we're going to allow for access to the Sheets API, to the Drive API, and for this we're going to use Auth0. Now they're sponsoring this video today. However, you don't have to pay for anything if you want to follow along with this tutorial. You don't have to sign up for a premium account or anything. You can just use the free version and you can do exactly the same thing that we do in this video today. So no need to worry about this, but they're sponsoring this video. I need to disclose that for the sake of transparency. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an account here. We're also going to create an account for Google and an account for OpenAI. If you don't have one, go ahead and do that. I'm not going to show the entire process. So in this case here, I already have an account. I can just click on login and I'm going to be taken to the dashboard, or in this case, I'm taken to the get started section. So I can click here to go to the dashboard, and here we're going to set up an application and the authentication, which we're then going to connect to our FastAPI application and also to our Google account. So the first thing we want to do here in Auth0 is we want to create a new application. So create an account, go to the dashboard, go to applications, and then just click on create application. Again, all of this is free, no worry about that. We're going to click here on regular web applications, and we're going to provide a name. For example, let's call this PDF extractor app, and then create the application. Now, you can choose a technology out of these. We're just going to go with basic Python because we don't have a FastAPI option here. And then we need to provide a couple of things here to make this work. We're going to go to settings, and we're going to have to provide so-called callback URLs. These are URLs that we're going to use, or that Auth0 is going to use to redirect back to our application. In particular, we're going to set this up to be HTTP, localhost, and of course, if you're running this on an actual server, you want to provide your server IP or your server domain. But in my case, just localhost port 8000/auth/callback. This is what we're going to define now. Later on, we have to also implement that. We don't have that yet because we don't have the FastAPI application yet. But this is going to be our callback URL. And also I want to provide a second one, which is going to be https://genai dash, and basically we're just taking this identifier here. So I'm basically going to copy this GenAI, whatever the number is, dot, in my case, eu.auth0.com/auth/callback. So by using a comma, we can separate the two, and now we have these two callback URLs. For the logout URL, I just want to have http localhost 8000. Now we can save that, and we can take a look at the quick start guide for user authentication. And we can see that what is recommended here, or what you have to do here, is you have to provide a couple of environment variables, the Auth0 secret, which is something we generate locally, the app base URL, which in our case is going to just be localhost 8000, not 3000 as it is specified here. Of course, feel free to choose whatever port you like, just be consistent with it. Then the Auth0 domain, which is determined by your tenant here, by your ID. So GenAI, whatever the number is, eu.auth0.com. Then the client ID, which is something that we can get also from the credentials. I'm going to show you where to get that in a second. And also the client secret. So you want to go to applications, you want to scroll up, you want to go to credentials. And here now you have, on the one hand, your ID up here. This is without going to the credentials tab. You just have the ID up here. You can copy it. And then also you can copy your client secret. It's not shown here, but you can just press this copy button, and it is taken to your clipboard. Then you can paste it in the environment file. So let us actually start now with the setup of our project. For this, I'm going to open up a terminal, and I'm going to navigate to my tutorial directory. And what I'm going to use in this video, you don't have to use the same tooling. I'm going to use UV. So I'm going to do UV init, then I'm going to do UV add and UV run and so on. If you don't want to use UV, or you don't know what UV is, you don't have to worry about this. All you have to do is instead you can do pip and pip3 install whatever packages you want to use, and then you can just use Python to run the application. But I like to use UV, so I'm going to use it. And in my case, because of that, I'm going to now say UV init. This is going to initialize the project in the current directory. Again, in your case, if you're not using UV, just create a Python file main py. The rest is the same. And now I'm going to create a file called .env. .env is going to contain all the key value pairs, all the environment variables. And in particular, I'm going to copy here everything up until this point. I need to do right-click copy, otherwise it's going to copy everything. Now, if you open this guide, you can also just press copy, and it's going to give you the correct credentials already, provided that you're logged in. But I want to do this here manually for demonstration purposes. So the Auth0 secret here tells us to run OpenSSL rand hex 32 to generate the secret key. We can do that in a second terminal, OpenSSL rand-hex32. We can take that and use that as a secret key. Of course, keep this secret if you're actually using this in your application. Don't show it in a video like I'm doing right now. For the app base URL, we're going to keep localhost. I want to change this here to port 8000. You can choose whatever you want, just be consistent with it. For the domain, we are going to keep the one that is determined by our tenant, by our ID here, GenAI whatever number.eu auth0.com. The client ID is something you can get from the application details. So you just have to go again to applications, to your application that you're using, PDF extractor app. Then the client ID is up here. You can just copy and paste it. And then you can also take the client secret by clicking on this button here and paste it down here. In this case now, the client ID is already, actually this is not the correct one. So let me actually change that. Now, the domain is the same for all projects or for all applications, but the client ID is different depending on your application. So make sure you choose the proper client ID, copy it from the application here. And now I'm also going to copy my secret. This is something I'm not going to show on video, but I'm going to paste it now here in the same way as the other values, and then it's going to be here. But before I do that now, in order to never open the .env file again, I also want to do something else. I want to specify here an OpenAI _API _key, and this is going to be my OpenAI API key. So to show you how this works, you go to platform.openai.com, you log in, you go to settings, you go to API keys, and then you just create an API key, you copy the secret key, and you paste it here as well. So these two things I'm going to do without recording them. So here I'm going to paste my secret key for the application, and here I'm going to paste the OpenAI API key, which is going to allow me to use the API for document extraction. All right, so we have this part handled. We have all the credentials in our .env file. Next thing we need to do is we need to set up a Google project. So you want to go to console.cloud.google.com. You want to go to the project picker, and you want to create a new project. So this project, let's call it PDF extractor secure or whatever. Let's connect it to my billing account, create it. And then once this project is created, we're going to switch to that project, and we're going to enable the two APIs that we're going to use. So I'm selecting this project. Then I will go to search, and I will look for two APIs. One is the Sheet API or the Sheets API, Google Sheets API. There you go. I'm going to enable this one. And also I want to enable the Drive API. So let's wait for this to happen. There you go, it's enabled. Now we're going to go for Drive. This is going to suggest the Google Drive API. Enable this one as well. Perfect. And now what we need to do, this is the most important part for the authentication. We need to go to the OAuth consent screen. So just type OAuth, then consent screen. And here now we need to configure the authentication platform. We need to create a consent screen. So let's click on Get Started. This requires us to provide a name. Let's call it PDF Extraction App. Now the support email is going to be my social Neural 9 email. It's going to be for external audience. I'm going to provide social@neural9.com as a contact information. I will agree to the policies, and I will create this application and project here. So what I want to do next is I want to create an OAuth client. So I click here on OAuth client or create OAuth client. The application type is web application. The name could be something like PDF extractor client. And now important here, we need to add some authorized JavaScript origins and authorized redirect URIs. So here for the origin of JavaScript, I'm going to add the following. I'm going to add the one that we already talked about before, which is the GenAI, whatever your number is, .eu.auth0.com. So the one that we used before. Same thing here. And for the redirect URIs, we use the exact same thing, but also /login/callback. So this is important. We need to provide this here and this here. And then we can just create the application. This is going to provide me with the client ID here. And also it allows me to download some JSON. So I can just copy this here. And there's two things that I'm going to need when I go into the project. You can see I have the client ID. This is what I have to pass on the one hand, and then also the client secret, which is, of course, again, secret. Don't show it to anyone if you're actually using it. But this is also what you want to use in addition to that. These are two things that we need to provide to Auth0. So the client ID and the client secret. So before we do that, though, let's also set up the data access. What can we actually do with this consent screen? What permissions do we actually need? And I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to give all the permissions of the Sheets API. So we'll just select these two, and I'm going to also give all the permissions for Drive, which is of course way too much. So you maybe don't want to do that. Actually, do I have to do it separately? Let's see. Drive API, there you go. Select all of that, select all of that. Of course, you can also be more granular if you want to. I'm just going to allow for everything, and then I'm going to click Save. All right, so the scopes are set up properly. Now, finally, let's go to Audience and provide test users. So in order to be able to use that, since this is not a confirmed application yet, I'm going to provide myself as a test user so that for me, this application is actually accessible. social@neural9.com. So now I'm a user of this application, a test user, and that is basically the setup on the Google side. What we now need to do on the Auth0 side is we need to go to this left menu here, and we need to go to authentication. So authentication, social, and in this case, I already have it here set up, but it's not really complicated. You have to just create a connection, and you want to select the Google/Gmail one, which in my case is already added. So I can just click into it. And what you want to do here now is you want to provide the client ID and the client secret. So what we're going to do is we're going to go here again to client. We're going to go to edit OAuth client. I'm going to copy the client secret. I'm going to pass the client secret here. And then I'm going to copy the client ID. And I'm going to replace this one here, which is from a previous project. Of course, pay attention to not copy anything that's not needed. So we have the ID, the secret, and besides that, very important, you want to also check all the permissions that we need here. So in my case, we don't need actually calendar, but we want to have offline access, and we also want to have the Drive permissions and the spreadsheets permissions. I think, and here, Sheets permissions as well. So these are the ones that we're going to use. Now we have the social connection set up. We have the proper ID, the proper client secret. This basically now means that our Auth0 application can authenticate itself with our, or has the permission to manage our Google application here, or our OAuth client here, our project essentially. So that is the setup that we need on the web basis. Everything else now is going to happen in code in FastAPI. Now, my plan for the coding here is to do it a little bit more efficiently. So I don't want to type out every single line of code. It would just waste your time and it would go beyond the point of this video. What I want to do here is I want to give you the code and I want to explain what each part of the code is doing. So we're not just going to skip stuff, but I don't want to spend time now typing every single thing from my second screen and making mistakes and fixing them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy paste segments of code. You're going to get the full code on GitHub by looking at the link in the description down below. So you can download it, play around with it, but I don't want to waste your time by typing everything letter by letter. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into main.py and we're going to delete everything that we have in here. And we're going to start with the imports. And together with the imports, we're also going to add the packages or install the packages. But I want to just briefly copy paste the imports here so we can talk about them and see what components we need. First of all, we have OS, IO, and JSON. These are just for basic file handling or file stream handling on the system. These are core Python packages, not too important. Then we have PyPDF2. This is just for taking a PDF document and extracting the text out of it. Very simple, without using any fancy APIs. This is OpenAI that we use for communication with the OpenAI API for the structured output. This .env package or python.env package is what we use to load the .env environment variables into the actual environment. So to take the stuff that we defined in the .env file and to actually load it into our environment so that we can use it with os.getEnv, which is why we use OS. Then we have Pydantic, which we use to define the model, the Pydantic model for the structured output. Then we have, of course, FastAPI itself and a bunch of imports from it so that we can do basic FastAPI stuff, handle requests, handle forms, provide HTML responses, redirect, and so on. Then we have the Google package or the Google packages. We use this for handling the credentials, for downloading the PDF documents from Drive and so on. And finally, we have Auth0 server Python, which of course we use to connect to Auth0 and do all the authentication handling. So before we move on with the code, I'm going to jump now to the tutorial directory and I'm going to add the dependencies. The packages are not always exactly called the same as the imports. So we're going to say uv add, or in your case, maybe pip or pip3 install, and then pypdf2, like this, OpenAI, python-.env, not just .env, but python-.env, pydantic, FastAPI, Google, then Google API, so Google-API-Python-client, and then also Auth0-server-Python. So UV add all of these packages. You can see it is very quickly done with UV. With pip, you have to wait a little bit longer. That's basically it. In addition to that, we're going to probably have to install or add a bunch of packages later on because UV-corn and stuff like that is not installed by default. We're going to get the error messages, then we're going to install these packages. But these are the imports and these are the packages that we need. Let us move on with the next code snippet, which is quite simple. We load the environment variables using load.env. This is what I talked about. This basically takes a .env file, loads the values into our environment. Then we define a class. This class is only defined because we need it for Auth0. So here the server client is initialized with a bunch of keyword arguments. And this is something you can just copy paste or you can just type off. You don't really need to understand every single part of it. It's just we're providing these environment variables here as keyword arguments. So the domain, the client ID, the client secret, the secret that we generated on our own system, redirect URLs, transaction store and state store, which are instances of this class, which is essentially just a key value store. We have our dictionary, sets a value for a key, gets the value for a key, delete pops a key, or a key value pair, you could say. And that is basically just what we use for the authentication. Very simple. This is something you just copy paste and it works. We have now the Auth0 instance and we can use that for authentication. We don't have to care about this and do this manually. Next, we have the base model, the Pydantic model for our invoice. You can customize this however you like. Of course, you can also parse different documents. You don't have to do invoices. You can do contracts. You can do annual reports, whatever. But we have here this class, which is for invoices. It has an invoice number, a date, a total sum, a recipient, a sender. That's basically it. Then we also initialize the OpenAI client by saying the API key is equal to os-get-env OpenAI API key. I'm not even sure if that's necessary. Maybe removing this would have the same effect because it just by default looks at this environment variable. But being explicit is oftentimes better. Then we create a FastAPI instance and then we have an empty dictionary for the user settings. Next up, we have a basic function that allows us to render HTML files. This is just a simple helper function that takes some template and fills some values into the template. So we're going to have some HTML files that I'm going to show you here after we're done with the FastAPI application. But basically, we're providing a template name. We go to the templates directory. We take that file, we read the content, we replace certain placeholders. So if we have a bunch of curly brackets here, as you can see, because double curly brackets represent a placeholder. If we find a key like that, we're going to replace it with a value so that we can fill the templates essentially. And then we take the base template, we replace the content field of the base template. So we have a base HTML structure, you could say. We have a content placeholder. We replace that placeholder with a content, which itself has placeholders, which we replace with key value pairs that are keyword arguments. And then we also replace the title, and that's it. So very simple, just for rendering HTML files. You can also change this. You can do this in a different way. This is just a helper function for displaying stuff. And then we have two more helper functions here for extracting PDF text and for extracting invoice data. How do we extract PDF text? Quite simple. We have the Drive service the drive service is passed as an argument. We're going to pass it later on. But essentially what we do is we get the files, we get a file ID from this drive service. So we pass a file ID to this function, we pass a drive service, it gets this file, it downloads it. So we take the PDF document, we download the file in chunks. So we go through the file, we download the chunks. At some point the file is downloaded, then we take that file, we open it with PyPDF2 PDF reader, we open all the pages, we iterate over the pages, we extract the text of each page, and we join all these pages together with a line break. That's it. Basically what this function does is it downloads a given file or a specified file, and it extracts the text from the PDF document as raw text. And this function here, extract invoice data, all it does is it sends a request to OpenAI. We say OpenAI client beta chat completions parse, and we just provide here the context that this is for extracting data from invoice PDFs. And the important thing here, response format is equal to invoice. We provide our Pydantic model as the structure, as a response format, and then we get just a model, a structured output, a JSON output here based on this Pydantic model. This is the last helper function. Now let us move on to the endpoints. What we're going to do here for the basic endpoint, for the root URL, you could say, is we're going to say, first of all, from the auth0 instance that we have here, so from the server client, if we have a user already, get it. So get the current user that is authenticated. If there is no such user, we need to log in. So we need to be forced to log in. What we do is we get a login URL by running the function auth0 start interactive login, and we return the template login HTML. So we force a login, and the login URL is passed to the template, so that when we press the login button, we're taken to this interactive login. So this function returns the URL. Pressing on the button that we're going to place in login HTML is going to get us to this URL, and then we're going to handle the login there, or auth0 is going to handle the login for us. So what we do here as well is we load the default settings or the past settings if we have them. Otherwise, what we do is we display a warning message that we need to configure the drive and sheet IDs. Otherwise, it's not going to work. This is what we do with this isConfigured Boolean. And besides that, we just return home HTML with the username, the folder ID, the sheets ID, and disabled if it's currently processing already. That is the basic idea. We also want to have a second button for saving the settings. So not just for processing the PDFs, but also for saving the settings. For this, we need a post endpoint /settings, which is going to do the following: get the user. If we don't have a user, we're going to just redirect to the root endpoint. Otherwise, if we do have a user, we just set folder ID and sheet ID based on the form that we have here. So these are form fields, folder ID and sheet ID. These are the text boxes we're going to place in the HTML. We just get the content from them, and we set this in our user settings dictionary for the specific user ID. Now, crucial is the next endpoint, which is the /auth/callback endpoint. This is what we provided for the application in auth0. And what we do here is we say complete interactive login. So this is where we return to when the login happens. So we say result is equal to auth0 complete interactive login, string request URL. And if we have an error, what we do is we render into the result HTML the error, the authentication error with the error message. Otherwise, what we do is we just redirect here with the script to the root endpoint. So what's going to happen is we're going to be redirected to this here, but we do already have a user. So what's going to happen is it's just going to render the home HTML with our settings and with the ability to process the PDFs and save the settings. That is what handles the successful or unsuccessful login. This is where the authentication process or the interactive login process returns to, since we provided that. Localhost /auth/callback is what we provided. And then, of course, the whole magic happens in the process endpoint, which is the Google magic here. It looks like a lot, but it's quite simple. So what we do here is, again, we check for the current user. If it exists, we just proceed. We get the settings, we get the folder ID and the sheet ID, nothing new. And then we try to authenticate ourselves. We try to get the access token for the connection for the following scope: drive and spreadsheets. That's basically it. And what we do then is, if there is a problem, we force an interactive login again. So we try to say, okay, if there is a problem with the authentication, try to log in again, get the credentials from the token. And then we have here the instance for Drive and for Sheets. We're connecting to the APIs here with the credentials. If everything is successful, we are then using these APIs. For files, what we do here is we say Drive, list the files that are in the folder ID. So we get all the files that are in the folder with the provided ID. So here we do that by saying folder ID in parents and MIME type is equal to application PDF, which means essentially give me all the PDF documents where the parent folder has the ID folder ID and where the documents are not trashed. So they're actually still there. And that's basically it. Get these files, execute this command, list all the files. And then what we do is we say for file in files, we take that file, we download it using the Drive. So this is our helper function. Remember, we pass the Drive service and we pass the ID of the file. This file is downloaded. The data is extracted using OpenAI. And then we have the rows that we want to keep track of. These rows have, these rows include data about the invoice number, the date, the total, the sender, the recipient, the name, and the modified time, so the timestamp of extraction. And then what we do is we just go, if rows exist at all, go to Sheets and append to the existing spreadsheet, append these values now like this. So that's essentially it. Column 1 is chosen, and then just append, and then just return that this was done successfully. Otherwise, we're going to get some error response before that. And yeah, so we're basically saying if some exception occurs, then what we want to do is we just want to return that there was a problem. And then, of course, there's only one last endpoint that we need to take care of, which is log out. We want to give the user the ability to log out. We do that by providing the log out endpoint, and by saying when you do this, when you get to this endpoint, you're basically calling the auth0 logout function. That's it. And then you're redirected to /. And finally, now to actually run all of this, we need to say if __ name _ is equal to _ main _ and then we just say import. Actually, let's do this in the very beginning. Let's do import UVcorn up here. So that UVcorn run the application, the host is going to be 0000, and the port is going to be 8000. That is our application. So let me briefly just go from top to bottom again. What we do is we load the environment variables. We create this class here, which is basically a simple key value store. We create the instance of our auth0 server client. We have our data model for the invoice extraction. We create our OpenAI client for doing the structured output. We create our FastAPI instance. We have empty user settings. We have a helper function for rendering HTML content, which we do with templates and replacing key value pairs and placeholders. Then we have a helper function for extracting text from PDF documents. We have a helper function for calling OpenAI and getting the structured output for a given text. So we call this first, then we feed the output into this one. As a result, we get a JSON object, a structured output object based on the data model. Then here we have the basic home endpoint, which is just checking if we have if we're logged in. Otherwise, it starts the login process. And for the settings, we have a post endpoint that allows us to save the settings, specifically folder ID and sheet ID. We have this very important callback, which is what auth0 returns to when our interactive login is completed, either successfully or unsuccessfully. Then we have this huge process endpoint here, which does the whole first downloading all the files, listing all the files, downloading all the files, extracting the information, and then putting it into Sheets. And then we have our simple logout endpoint. The only thing left to do now is to create a templates directory, and in this templates directory to create the HTML files that we listed or that we referred to in our code. So I'm going to start with base.html. Here we have some very basic styling. Again, this is not really interesting. This is just styling stuff. You can use a React frontend if you want to. You can use fancy JavaScript. Essentially, the important part is we have a body, we have a title, and we have content. These are the placeholders. We replace content with whatever we want to render into this base HTML file. Then we're going to have another one, home.html, which is the following. Basically, this is what is rendered into content, so we don't need the same structure again. We just take that and replace content with that. Here again, we have placeholders like username and warning message. These are replaced as key value pairs. And we also have the input fields for the drive folder ID and the sheets ID so that we can pass this and submit this. This is calling the /settings endpoint with post. So this is where we set the settings. And of course, we also have a second form down here for processing the PDFs, which sends a post request to /process. The login HTML is very trivial. All we have to do in this one is that we just have to provide a button login with Google, because if you're not logged in, that's what you need to do. The interesting thing here is that login URL is a placeholder, so this is going to be returned by auth0. So clicking on this button will take us wherever this login URL is. And then finally, we have our results.html, which is just a status and a message. So either successfully completed, or here's an error and here's the detailed error message. Now, I think before we can run this, we need to set up one more thing. I remember that I did this when I prepared the video and I didn't do this now, which is we need to go to settings. We need to go to the very bottom. We need to go to advanced settings, and we need to go to grant types, and we need to allow for token exchange federated connection. So save that. And also, I think I didn't mention this even though it's necessary because I already had it. For the social connection, you want to go down to the very bottom as well. So you want to scroll down to the very bottom and you want to enable the token vault, which is a very nice feature that allows us to store and retrieve access tokens for APIs. So this is quite useful. Make sure this is enabled. Make sure that you selected the grant type. And then what we can do is we can exit NeoVim or whatever editor you used. And we can do the following, uv run main.py. Now I think I'm going to get some problems here with the dependencies. So uv add uvcorn, then uv run main.py, and I think one more, Python multipart was it. So uv add python -multipart. But besides that, especially since I copy pasted the code, I think that should work out. So uv run main.py, let's see, runs the application here on localhost. I mean, it's 127.0.0.1. I hope this works too. And now what I can do is I can press this button, login with Google. I'm taken to authorize app. You can see here is requesting to access the account. I can accept that. Now you can see I'm logged in. Actually, I think this will not work first try for you that easily. I think what you will have to do is you have to actually accept all the permissions and grant all the permissions for the Google project. Maybe we're going to see that this is still the case if I try to do this now. So let's actually go to the drive into the sheet and let's copy the identifiers. I'm just going to take that. I'm going to paste the drive folder here. I'm going to take the sheet ID from here to here. Paste it here, save the settings, and let's see if I can process the PDFs. If not, if there's some problem, probably I will have to relog in, which is either it's going to work first try or it's going to tell me to log in again because I'm now using a different project. Okay, I got a problem. It says result HTML doesn't exist. I think this is because in templates, I called this results.html. So let's rename this from results to results.html. And let's rerun this. I think that is not an issue. Now let's try the whole thing again. Let's go back. Let's reload this page, log in with Google, use the same IDs, save the settings, process PDFs. And it says successfully processed 5 PDF files. There you go. It appended the data. It's basically the same as above. And this worked. So again, if you do this for the first time, you probably have to authenticate yourself with the Google account. So you have to provide all the scopes. You're going to get a window with all the checkboxes where you have to say, I'm sure I trust this application. I just have this now on my system already done, so I don't have to do that. but this is how you can build a secure generative AI application. You saw we didn't have to handle any authentication whatsoever. The only thing we had to do is we had to provide the URLs, the callback URLs, where has Auth0 to go to handle it for us, and the rest was done automatically. The login, the logout, by the way, I can just log out like this. The login, the logout, everything was handled by Auth0. I also didn't have to handle any Google keys. So of course I have the Auth0 keys, but I didn't have to handle locally in my FastAPI application the Google keys or anything like that. So I was using Auth0 with the token vault to do that for me. And this is quite convenient. Again, check them out in the description down below. They're sponsoring this video, and you can do all of this for free like I did it in this video, and you will find a link to this project or to the code of this project in the description down below. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something. If so, let me know by hitting the like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to not miss a single future video for free. Other than that, thank you much for watching. See you in the next video, and